Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever episode of Book Chat Live. Now, I've done one test broadcast before on Amazon Prime Day where I just talked about random travel gadgets. But what I'm hoping to do is to have this as a semi-regular live show here on Amazon where we talk to people about their book recommendations. Now, obviously, most of the time I'm going to be interviewing somebody and asking them for their particular book recommendations and what books they've been reading and what books they like. But I thought I'd start off by going through some books that I've read over the last few years that I thought were worth recommending. So they've managed to rearrange them in an order I wasn't expecting at the bottom. But the first book we've got is How to Get a Meeting with Anybody by Stuart. I'm going to mispronounce his name. He's a friend of mine. He's a nice guy. I think it's Hynek, Stuart Hynek. I could be wrong. If it's Heinecke, then apologies, Stuart. But this is a guy who's a new Wall Street Journal cartoonist, but he has really taken off in this idea of what he calls contact marketing, where it's all about getting meetings with people and how to do that in a unique way. So lots of businesses would obviously do well if they could meet the right kind of customer. Or let's say you're trying to get a job offer somewhere, then reading a book like this, which is all about those techniques that people have about getting access to that person who's really hard to get connected to. So that's what the book does exactly what it says it does. It teaches you how to get a meeting with anybody. And there's lots of really good advice in that particular book. So let's go on to the next one. It seems to put, or I was trying to intersperse in my, if you go to my Amazon shop, you'll see them in the order that I thought I added them in, but it seems to put all the business books at the front, which isn't bad, I suppose. But that's the next book is the EMyth Revisited by I think it's David Gelber. Somebody Gelber. I don't know. So that's not great, so I can't read it. But what this book is, it's actually a very practical book for a lot of owners of businesses and people who are looking at branching out as maybe a freelancer or a contractor or something along those lines. And the E is not about anything to do with electronic or the internet or anything like that. It's to do with entrepreneur. And the myth that he talks about in the book is this idea that if you're a very good employee doing a particular trade or thing, that you can immediately transfer that to be a great business. So the myth is that, like, if you're just very good at something, you can take that and form business out of it. When what he suggests, and I found from my experience this is true, that what you actually need is to build systems. So what you need is a system in business. So ideally, if you're running a business, what you need to do is create a system which other people can do, either by outsourcing or by you just setting up like particular automated systems in your business, so that if you weren't there, the business will keep going. And that's where the true growth and money is in business. So that's what the whole book is about. So the EMyth Revisited is a very good book about entrepreneurship and running a business. It's very sort of brass tacks, kind of to the point. There's no sort of fluffy kind of like, let's all talk about nice stuff. This is all about a very practical book about running a business. The next book we've got on the list is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, I actually read a different book which was based on this before I read this book, but this is actually, this is the more famous book, and I think this is a better way of describing this particular. What the author talks about is how he had two fathers, and one was his biological father and one was his adopted father, and they had very different attitudes towards money. Now, so obviously his whole point of the book is that your success in terms of money is based on your attitudes as much as luck or opportunity or anything else. It's a really good book, especially if you're somebody who struggles with a lot of sort of basic day-to-day finance and other things. It's much more about mindset than it is about practical tips per se. But I actually thought it was really good in terms of stuff that's often obvious to people like me who have generally been better with money in the past. But there's a lot of people who, like, the stuff in this book would be really useful for them to know, just from the mindset idea. So let's have it. And we finally get onto a book that's not a business book. This is the Star Wars book about Thrawn. Now, Thrawn is kind of originally a character from the expanded universe of Star Wars. So they created all these books and other things between, like, the end of the prequels. Well, actually, between the end of the first set of Star Wars films and the Disney ones. So around, I'm not sure if it's before or after the prequels. But as soon as Disney took over, they got rid of a lot of the further the works. But one of the characters from what was called the expanded universe was Thrawn. And I think Thrawn is now back canon again. He's been mentioned in The Mandalorian as a villain, so I suspect that he's going to become a much more important character. But he's actually a fantastically written book about Thrawn, who is this admiral in the Empire, who is from a totally alien race who comes into, and just by the force of his personality gets promoted up to the high levels of the Empire. I think if you're interested in, like, wider Star Wars universe beyond the films, Thrawn is a character also in the Rebels animated series, which is very good as well. I think you start with the Clone Wars if you're watching the animated ones actually first, but Rebels is very good, and he's the main bad guy in that series as well. So Thrawn is actually, this is a really good, I mean, I listen to as an audiobook. Most of these I listen to as audiobooks rather than as reading them, but I'm sure it's great as a written novel as well. It's a really good storyline, and it's really good characterization for Thrawn as well. He's a bit more threatening in the book than he is in the Rebels TV series, but Rebels is basically aimed at children, so it's probably allowed to be a bit more threatening, so to speak. Another non-business one, Poirot. For those of you who are maybe too young to remember, Poirot is an Agatha Christie character, but he was famously betrayed almost to the point where people associate David Suchet, the actor, with Poirot. Now, I listened to this as an audiobook, and it's actually David Suchet who narrates it, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong at some point, but I think he goes into, like, really great depth about how he was just so obsessed with getting the character right. He would spend, like, weeks practicing the mannerisms of the character. And it's just interesting from a psychological perspective, as well as being a really good read or listen. This book is just, I mean, I probably would recommend the audiobook, so you get to hear all his voice, all his experiences in his own words. But Poirot, it's a really good, it talks about how David Suchet created the character and how he went to all the effort of becoming almost the definitive Poirot. I know Peter Ustinov played him in some films, but generally speaking, if you mention Poirot, most people would go for David Suchet as the main lead character. The next book's another business one, which is Influence. And I've not been pressing the buttons on these. Oh, sorry. But anyway, so if you wanted the Poirot one, that was the Poirot one. Let's go back and press it. That was Thrawn, Rich Dad Poor Dad, the EMyth Revisited, and how to get a meeting with anybody. Right, let's get back to the next Next one, influence. Now, this is a very specialist one. If you're interested in what I would call business psychology or marketing at all, you really should read this book, because it's by a psychologist called Robert Cialdini, who's he's more moved towards the business side of things now, but he talks through all of the principles that people use in marketing, in business. So things like reciprocity, doing stuff and then people doing it back, reciprocity. I can't do a live stream without screwing up in some way, but you know the word. It's reciprocity. That's the so like there's lots of cases where you will be like, somebody will hand you a flower and then you feel like you've got to give them money or something along those lines. And he talks about things like social proof, so that if you see reviews for a product, that can help a lot. So he talks about all these basic fundamental marketing principles. He does it in a really good way. I would definitely recommend this if you're interested in doing marketing yourself, or you're just interested in the general psychology of business. There's at least some principles I think you can apply here. Well, this is it's not so much business. It is business, but it's also a kind of a general life guide. In this book, the author talks about basically particular expressions you can use to try and convince people to do things. It's a fairly short book. I'm not going to claim that this is a long book. You may want to get in the Kindle edition because I think it's reasonably cheaper there. But the audiobook's still. I listened to the audiobook several times over. It's so useful in what it says. There's no sort of fat at all on this. You can listen to the whole audiobook in about an hour, I think. But he gives you a whole load of stock phrases, and I've tried them out, and they kind of work. Now, a lot of the time, I think it works because you're just having to remember it rather than thinking about the particular expression. But they are things, it's basically what to say in particular situations. It talks about business, but it's not entirely about business. A lot of the time it's about negotiation and other things. So a very good, quick read if you're looking to improve some of your social skills and things. All right, going totally to something different again. We got The Age of Influence by Neil Schaefer. Now, this is a fantastic book about how to do influencer marketing. So influencers are not necessarily these people you see on Instagram who are sitting there with in their bikini in front of a Lamborghini in a mansion. Influencers are people with genuine influence, and there's lots of them in all sorts of areas now. So let's say you are running a tools company or something along those lines and trying to sell your tools, then you could go to a YouTuber and who run a channel like reviewing tools or that kind of thing. That guy will be an influencer, even though he wouldn't necessarily be sitting there in his Lamborghini. The genuine influencers are actually people who can have influence over the people who listen to them or watch them or do them. And this is a fantastic book about how to basically approach and to use influencers from a business perspective. I'm not read a better or listened to a better book about this particular topic. So I would highly recommend it if you're interested in influencers or using influencers to try and improve your business. All right, the next one. The next one is, this is kind of businessy, but it's actually about negotiation in general. So Never Split the Difference. I think it's Chris Voss. I need to work out a way that I can actually see the titles of these, because at the moment I've got it set up on my phone and I've got small little details. Never Split the Difference is by a former FBI negotiator, and what his advice is that too often we're compromising as our approach to do negotiation. And he gives a whole range of techniques in this book, which I need to reread it again, or actually listen to it again. I've got it as an audiobook. And a lot of it is kind of psychology to do with negotiation. And I can see so often, like, he goes through particular hostage negotiation situations he went through and why they worked and why they failed and what he learned about. And most of it is not about like who gave more. It was because the whole point of hostage negotiation is obviously you don't want to say, well, you keep one prisoner and I'll get one freed. You have to get everybody out. So that's his whole point about like never splitting the difference. It's all about basically how to negotiate effectively. Right, the next book is The Obesity Code. And this is, I think it's Jason Fung, I think this book's by. And he's a kidney, I think he was a kidney doctor, who got so interested in why, oh no, it was liver. Well, he was a doctor that wasn't to do with nutrition, but he got interested in why he was getting so many patients getting worse after they were getting diabetes. And this whole book is about intermittent fasting, basically, and also low carb as dieting. Now, obviously, that's kind of the approach I'm using at the moment, so I'm a little bit biased, but he makes an awful lot of good points about how the body actually works, as opposed to a lot of the what you would call the standard health advice, because there's a lot of advice there about like breakfast is the most important meal of the day and you should eat grains and potatoes and lots of food that actually is quite bad for you if you've got long-term insulin problems. So it's a very good book if you're looking to lose weight or to understand actually about long-term issues with health. It's a very, I mean, it's realistic. It's not like a lot of dieting books where they're just follow this advice and you'll be wonderful and it's fine and all the rest of it. He kind of says in the middle of the book that there's a lot of stuff that is hard to do, but it kind of all makes sense. In some ways, it's like he almost admits at the end of the book that there isn't really anything you can do in certain areas, but you can at least go in the right direction. Anyway, on to the next book. The next book is Cumulative Advantage by Mark Schaefer. Now, we did a whole interview with Mark Schaefer about this book on the Oh No Another Live show. But the point he's making is that, and this is true for a lot, I've read a lot of books that say a similar theme to this, but I think it's probably the best one on it, that a lot of your success is made in those small little changes that build up, the cumulative element. That's what cumulative means. And yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting book in as much as it's all about the long term. It builds in a way on his previous book, Known, and also Marketing Rebellion. And they're all kind of, you can see the way his thinking's going with these books. So yeah, I mean, it's a really good read, and it's much more of a life-based book than a marketing book, even though that's what Mark Schaefer's famous for, is for marketing. He's a marketing professor in Rutgers College in the US. But this is just a really good book about life in general and how life is built on those little small cumulative things that you improve over time. And this is tells you kind of how to do that. Next one. The next book is A State of Fear. Now, this is a very recent best-selling book, and this is all about how the British government has been using behavioural science during the British pandemic, the British pandemic, the COVID pandemic. Now, obviously, it's controversial. There's a lot of people who obviously would downplay this book, but it's a very good read. And I think whatever your viewpoint is on lockdowns and their effectiveness, I think you should certainly read the book if you don't appreciate it. But there's definitely lots of concerning issues in the UK with the way that behavioural science has been used in some of the elements of the pandemic, whatever your viewpoints about the government in general. It's really, there's a lot of really interesting tidbits and statistics in this book about, like, the biggest thing is like how this whole area of behavioral science is now being used in government in general. So I think if you're interested in government, or if you really want to understand like a lot of the stuff that was happened in the pandemic in the UK, at least, in some ways it might be interesting to people outside the UK, but it's most relevant to people in the UK or who have got an interest in the UK to read. And my last book is the last book that well, it's not actually the last book I listened to, but I might do the last book I listened to in a future show. But this is called Sleepwalkers, and it's a book about it's a few years old, actually. I saw a YouTube video by this guy, and it's about how the First World War started. Now, the traditional narrative has always been that largely it was the Germans' fault. While this book actually does a very good job of pointing out the fact that actually, yeah, it was people sleepwalking towards disaster, and it has relevance to the modern time as well, because there are parallels between now and then in terms of the state of the world. Certainly, listening about like the way that the Kaiser in Germany run his government, and also the way that certain governments are run now, it's kind of interesting. And it was all very much people assuming that other people wouldn't do particular things, and then when they did, they were all, oh. And they all ended up basically starting this massive war that has like long-term consequences. I mean, you could argue the First World War had consequences into 1945, 46. And yeah, it's really fascinating. I listened to it on an audiobook because I mostly listen to stuff on audiobook. But I think this book really in any form could be very readable. Certainly if you're interested in the First World War and you want a more balanced view than like, oh, the Germans did it, or the British did it, or somebody did it. As a guy talks about, it's like he's more concerned about how it started than who to blame. And I think it's a very good book. I did enjoy listening to it as a book about the First World War. So anyway, that is my first ever episode of Book Chat Live. I'm hoping to get a guest on who may be familiar in our next few days. I'm not necessarily going to have regular times for these. I suspect a lot of people might watch them in replay, and that's perfectly fine. Just go down and click through. I mean, the way that Amazon Live works is that if you click through and buy one of these books, then I'll get a small little commission from it. And if you buy anything from on Amazon, actually, then I think I think I'll get a commission, which is nice. It's a nice feature about Amazon Live. So this, hopefully, I can work out the format with a guest. I think it'll be easier in a way to talk through particular books with a guest. And obviously, I'm hoping to get to longer show than 20 minutes or so. So I will be having guests on the show, some authors and some people about particular topics. So thank you for watching this, and I'm going to try and end the stream now. Fingers crossed.